Hi, welcome back to Advancing the Cause, the podcast of IFCA International. My name is Richard Bargas. I'm your host, and I'm the Executive Director of IFCA. This is the fourth part of our church series on Church SOS, where we've been talking about how churches can look into what's going on in their church if they're having problems maybe with the church shrinking in size, or maybe it's just not very healthy and you're trying to figure out what to do. In the previous series, we talked about what some of those causes might be and how you can be thinking about things like in a funnel where you start at the top with the most people coming in with visitors, and then where you would look down to those that become more and more committed as they become believers, get baptized, join the church as members, and eventually, hopefully, some of those becoming leaders in the church. In this last part of this series, I'd like to go a little bit deeper into what it means to think about visitors for your church. In episode 3 of this series, we talked about maybe some things that you need to think about with your church facilities and parking and the website, and even a little bit about how you need to deal with the visitors as they come. But I'd like to dig a little bit deeper about what to do, first of all, with how to get visitors. And of course, there's a lot of different ways you can think about how your church might be better at inviting people to your church and to the programs that you have. But I also want to look at specifically how can you figure out what to do with them once you have them. And so let's begin with how to get them. Just a few ideas, really the way that you need to be thinking as you're looking to bring people into your church. The first thing I want you to know is that you have some built-in opportunities already. The reality is that lots of people, especially when we're talking about the United States, but this probably is true for other parts of the world as well, is that they come to church on two major Christian holidays, if they're Christians, or at least think of themselves as Christians of some sort. And that would be Easter and Christmas. Even people who aren't Christian, aren't religious, will come to church on those holidays just out of traditions. They like the traditions that surround those two holidays, and so they might come for various programs or different things that are going on during that season, or maybe they're feeling a little nostalgic, and so they might come. So as you're thinking about those holidays, I think you really need to be strategic as to how are you going to promote them, not just to the people in your church. Oftentimes we get so insulated that we forget about everybody outside, and we're really pushing things on the people in our church, which I think the church is primarily for those that are believers, those that you're already ministering to in your church family. But you need to think beyond that. How can those within your church invite others to come and join them at church? And the two opportunities I mentioned, Christmas and Easter, are very good opportunities for you. Now, as I say all these things, Christmas and Easter are two really good things that I can illustrate for you why you want to be careful in all of these things as you're trying to bring visitors into your church. You want your church to be attractive. That means you don't want trash on the lawn, or the lawn uncut, or weeds, or shrubs that are overgrown, or people can't figure out where they're supposed to park, or that your bathrooms are nasty and the nursery is unsafe. Those are not pragmatic things in the sense of you're just trying to attract people. See, we want our churches to be attractive, but not necessarily philosophically attractional. And sometimes it's hard to know where the line is, but the reality is we want to please the Lord Jesus Christ first. We really do serve an audience of one. We are coming to worship as believers of Jesus Christ, and we want to make sure that when we are working at bringing visitors in, that we don't lose sight of that. Let me give you an example of that. I know when I was pastoring in Southern California that we really tried to go out into our neighborhood and invite people to come to our Easter services. We had Good Friday services along with Easter Sunday service. And of course, we held the traditional other services like Palm Sunday and things like that. But the big ones really were Good Friday and Easter Sunday. So what we would do is we would make up a half-sheet flyer and invite people in our neighborhood to come and worship with us the risen Savior, Jesus Christ. Really what it did was it told them what the Friday night, the Good Friday services, what time they were, as well as our Easter Sunday service and what time it was. There were churches in our community that were doing raffles. Some were doing things like giving away video game systems, Easter egg hunts, had the Easter bunny photo opportunities, big, gigantic, grand things. Even one year, a local church was raffling off a car. Okay, that's attractional. We weren't doing that. As a matter of fact, we traditionally had held a Easter breakfast during our Sunday school hour, which came before our morning services. We never put that on our flyers. And the reason was philosophically, we didn't want people to come to our church just to get a free breakfast. Now, your community might not be that, but in my community where we were at, where our church was at, you would get a lot of people, I hate to say it this way, but they were kind of freeloaders. If you gave away a free meal, they would come. And they would be so bold as to come, eat your breakfast, and then leave, not even stay for the service. We don't want it to be a bait and switch. They'll come and then we'll secretly usher them into the service and then we'll evangelize them there. No, we wanted them to come to worship. And yes, they weren't believers. Many of them didn't even understand. But we weren't doing a big, and there's nothing wrong with a sunrise service, but some churches in our area would do this, with a big old concert and popular Christian artists and the whole thing. And so we were very intentional as we were going to invite people who were going to come because they wanted to see what it meant to worship a risen Savior. So same thing goes for Easter and Christmas. You want to make sure that you're not, Santa Claus isn't coming to town and you're not doing this big extravaganza. And for most of you churches that I'm talking to, you couldn't afford to do it anyways. You're not like the old Crystal Cathedral in LA where they had commercials on TV where they had live animals, donkeys and camels come and see the flying angels. And it was a whole spectacular. It really was. The circus had come to town. No, you don't need to compete with that. That's not what the church is about. But you should let your community know because there may be some people where God is stirring their hearts. They're trying to figure out, what do I do? As a matter of fact, we did have a young man who literally had been struggling with his spiritual walk. He didn't know. He had begun reading the Bible. He was searching. God was drawing him. And he tells the story where he said to himself, and to God, if you're real, then send somebody to tell me about you. And wouldn't you know it, that very day, we had teams from our church that had gone out into the neighborhood and were knocking on doors and were handing out that flyer, inviting people to Good Friday, Easter, Sunday services. He took it as being from God. And he went to the Good Friday service. He came to the Easter Sunday service. He got saved. He got baptized, became a member, eventually became a deacon in our church. The Lord took him as a young man, but God saved him from an outreach event that was, not flashy, not spectacular. It wasn't anything to write home about, but yet he was looking. He was looking for something, and God used that as a way to reach him. So take heart. If you don't have any donkeys and camels and flying angels in your church, you don't need them because God works through ordinary, normal means to proclaim the gospel through your church. But don't miss the opportunity. You've got Easter, you've got Christmas, they're built into the calendar. I was always surprised. We did it a little differently than some churches do. We actually had to wrestle in a Hispanic community where many people were with family on Easter or at Christmas Eve. We had to figure out, do we do Christmas Eve service? Do we do Christmas Day service? And, we tried a few different things. We didn't want to disrupt the family, but we knew that Jesus is the whole reason why we have salvation. And so Christmas, where we celebrate his birth, is a special day. And so we made it a Christmas day. No matter what day Christmas Day fell on, we were having service on Christmas morning. And yeah, it's an extra chore to get all the family together. You got meals happening, you got things that are going on, and there are people that might not make it, but we were always astounded that so many churches were closed on Christmas morning, the day that Jesus was born. That's the day we celebrate it, right? And people didn't even have services on that day. Lots of churches didn't have services on that day. Well, guess what? We did. Our little church, and we had visitors from other churches. Now, we weren't planning on trying to steal them. I think that's a despicable practice, sheep stealing. But we were glad to have them join us and worship with us and know that there was a strong community of saints right there in our town in the little corner that our church was based on. So Christmas and Easter, those are two made opportunities. A couple other ones are weddings and funerals. Now, of course, it's not a normal church service and they're not scheduled the way they are, but take advantage when you have weddings and funerals in your church that you have materials out that tell visitors that come to your church to see the wedding, to participate in it, maybe are there at the funeral grieving. They may be from out of town, that's fine. But those that might be local, put stuff out so that they can know, and make sure you have some gospel tracts there, especially for those that are grieving the loss of a loved one. Well, those are 4: Easter, Christmas, weddings, and funeral. One more that takes a little bit more work and might cost a little bit of money, but it doesn't have to, is to watch for new neighbors that have moved into your neighborhood. Every once in a while, take a drive around your neighborhood and note down houses that are for sale. You'll see the for sale signs up. Just write down the addresses. And then maybe within a couple weeks, within a month, drive back around and see which ones say sold or the sign is gone and there's probably a new family there. That's the free and cheap way to do it. It used to be, and it may still be, that you could actually go to real estate agents. You can get the listings there from the community. You can also sometimes get those through mailing lists where they'll sell them to you. They sell them because they want to know that there are people that are buying their new products. They might be, hardware stores or packets to welcome people to the community, banks and things like that. They all buy it because they want to take advantage of people that are new to the community as well. So you could reach out and pay for one of those lists. But if you're a small church, you don't have a large budget, then you can do it on the cheap by just driving around. Maybe even tell your congregation, hey, drive around whenever you see a house for sale, write it down and give it to the pastor or to the deacons and elders, and we'll follow up and make sure that we check that out. And see, when you find that they're new to the community, you can be the first one to reach out to them, welcome them to the community, and tell them about your church. You never know. They might be looking for a church. Some program ideas that I'd love to throw out for you to maybe find new visitors coming in from these reasons. And there's lots and lots of them out there, but you need to try them. They may not work great. All our communities are different. People interact differently. Even times change and they may not always work. But you should try them at least once and see if they'll work. Doesn't hurt anything. One is an old one. It's Invite a Friend Sunday. You might want to make it a special day. Tell everybody in your church, okay, next month we're going to have this day. And we want to invite a friend. Maybe you have a potluck afterwards, after church, and everybody comes and enjoys lunch afterwards. So you'll make up some invitation cards, make it a very special day. Make sure you have some name tags. I'm not a big fan of name tags, but when you have a lot of new people and you might not know them, name tags are especially helpful for them. So Invite a Friend Sunday. Sports ministries are another one. You might have a basketball court in your parking lot. Maybe you're blessed enough to have a gym. You might have a nice field where you could do maybe some kind of a soccer clinic or maybe flag football. You might just do it at the local park. There's lots of ways you could use sports outreach to just get some teams together from the neighborhood, maybe from local communities. Maybe you do it in a local park, and you can not only get the teams together, it doesn't cost you much to buy a cheap little trophy that you can give out at the end of it, but you also give devotionals or give an opportunity to share the gospel with people, or maybe just invite them to come to your church, especially if you've got the facilities there at your church to play these sports. Vacation Bible School. This is one that churches use all the time, but maybe you don't utilize it as well as you could. You see, you've got all these children coming, and sometimes you don't ever see their parents, or parents drop them off and they take off again. What about if when you registered the children, you also took note that you can go visit those parents? We're going to talk about following up in a minute. But Vacation Bible School is an opportunity for you to have an end of the week event. We used to do a little carnival, whereas the kids were memorizing verses. They could earn tickets, and then we had a carnival. It didn't cost anything, but you could use the tickets to play kind of homemade carnival style games, to buy hot dogs and popcorn, which the church provided, or people in the church would donate prizes as well, kind of like a Chuck E. Cheese or a little carnival prize where you could get free giveaways. There was lots of ways for us to get prizes. Even as a little church that didn't have much money, you could come up with something either fancy or something that was very simple. We even had one of our elders donated a dunk tank, and then he would get in it, I would get in it, and then we'd have members get in it. It's always fun to see somebody get dunked. So doing something at the end and then having the parents invited and come, they get to know some of the people in your church. And of course, your church people need to run the games, and then they get to meet some of the people. They get to introduce themselves. And you don't want to have everybody working. You want to have some people available just to talk to the people that are coming, get to know them a little bit. It'll be a great opportunity for the community to come out, especially something for free. Children's programs. You might have all kinds of children's programs. There's lots and lots of children's programs that your church could be involved in. Some of those children's programs have events. They might have maybe Bible memorization, or they might race cars, or they might have some kind of sport that's attached to the thing. There's a lot of things that are part of that children's program. And so if you have a particular children's program that your church is involved in, make sure you build into it maybe a parents' night, or maybe some other kind of special night that the parents feel welcomed to come and enjoy, to watch what their kids are doing and have a good time doing it while they're there. Another one is new college students. You might have a local college. It might be a community college. It might be a university. It might be a larger college. If you have students in your church that go to that college, even better. You have an in. Maybe start a Bible club. Maybe just have them volunteer to go and vacuum some of the rooms of the students on the weekends. You just buy a few vacuums as a church. You give it to them as a ministry, and then they go in there, and then these kids are going to go, well, why are you volunteering to vacuum, to clean our room? Well, let me tell you, because we come from whatever your church's name is, and we want to serve you because Jesus has taught us how to serve. That'll get them interested in interacting. You might want to think about carpooling as well. Sometimes students would love to come to your church and join the college ministry. They don't have a way of getting there. And so if you could set up some kind of a carpool ministry, that might even go even farther. How about a garage giveaway? We did this at our church for several years. It was a wonderful success. And what a garage giveaway basically is we made up 2 sets of flyers. One set of flyers was to go out into our neighborhood. We would regularly go out into our neighborhood and knock on the doors and invite people to church and share the gospel if they were open to it. And you should do that as well. But in addition to this, we would go into the neighborhood for this garage giveaway, and we would say, hi, we're from Grace Baptist Church, and we're doing a wonderful event next month called Garage Giveaway. We're going to do basically like a garage sale, but we're not selling anything. We just want to give it to other people who have a need. And so if you have anything, we're going to come around and we're going to collect it in 2 weeks. And so we'd have the date on the flyer, and we'd say, so we're going to come by your house. If you have anything, just let us know. Or if you'd like, you come drop it off at the church. And then we'd have a list of things that we'd want, and we'd tell them we don't want anything that's torn or broken or anything like that. Just nice things that we could give to people who had needs. That was the first set of flyers. We had great responses to that. People would say, oh, that's a wonderful idea. How kind, how loving for you to do that. And of course, they want to get rid of stuff sometimes. They'd have things that they'd been setting aside to give to Goodwill or some other charity organization, and they'd love to give it to somebody in their own community. The second flyer was made for those that we wanted to attract to this event. Of course, we would tell people that were there, you can come if you have any needs, you can come and take part of the garage giveaway and take some things if you'd like. But most of the people that were in the houses had a lot of good stuff. What they needed to see was people who could benefit from it. So we would go to the places where people who have regular needs might be. Some of those places we discovered was the shelters, the covers, the 3 walls, the top roof where you have a bench for people to wait for buses, the bus shelters. We would tape them to the inside of the bus shelters. They didn't have a car. They were usually going to the store to work, and we would put those things up because we figured, hey, if you don't have a car, you might have other needs. We'd also go to laundromats. We would ask permission from the person in the laundromat, and we'd say, can we put this flyer up? This is a giveaway. We're not selling anything. It's just our local church, and we want to help people, and a lot of your customers probably have some needs. We would also go to some of the poorer sections of our town, and we would find apartment buildings, another place where there was a lot of people that just were lower economically, and they didn't have a lot, but they had a lot of needs. And so we would do that, and we would ask restaurants and other places in town. It was spreading goodwill with our church's name on it. And of course, there would be people that maybe would see that and didn't have anything to give, didn't have any needs where they needed anything, but in their mind they were thinking, that church is a good church. They're doing good things in our community, and they'd love to support us. And so then on the day of the event, well, actually a few days before, we'd have volunteers from our church come. We'd set up tables in an area inside the church, and we'd sort through the things, get the clothes into, the children's clothes, the baby clothes, the adult clothes, men's and women's, and do all of that. That was a lot of the things that we would collect. And then we'd have household items and electronics and things like that. Then on the day of the event, we'd get there extra early, and we would go into our parking lot. Now, our parking lot was fenced in. It had wrought iron gates because it was a pretty rough neighborhood. And so we could go into the area and we could pretty much close it off all the way. And we'd set the tables up. We'd set up some speakers. If we had people from our church that were playing music, we could have them play live music while we were there. We could also put Christian music on using our phone or something like that, and just have Christian music playing over the speakers. Then we set a special table over where we offered for anybody that wanted prayer. We had some people that were there because it was a Hispanic community. We had bilingual people there that would pray for others. And then we would close the gate off almost completely. We didn't do it completely because we didn't want a whole bunch of people going in, because we had a table in front of the gate where we asked them to register. Now I'm going to get to that part again where we talk about follow-up. But because we wanted them to register, we wanted them to fill out a card to know who they were so that we could follow up with them. And so we'd have them fill out a visitor card that we used inside of our church, have their name and have their address. We would give them a tract. We would give them a flyer for our children's program during the week and invite them to come. And then we would let them come in. Now, what we learned through that, and I'll share this with you because it's helpful, is that there were certain people who would come and they would have these trucks, and what they were doing is going around to yard sales we did this, by the way, on a Saturday when in our community most individuals did yard sales. They would come by with these trucks that were loaded with stuff, and what they were doing is going to yard sales. They would buy up stuff really cheaply, and then they would drive over the border into Mexico, and then they would sell it. Now, of course, we're giving away a whole bunch of stuff. And so I think it was the first time we did it, we saw these trucks pulling up and they were loading stuff up. We had to put a stop to that because they were hurting the people we were trying to help. So instead, we said there's a limit. You can have 5 items each person. Well, we also bent that rule a little bit because we would see these mothers coming in with these little kids, and you could tell by the way they were dressed, they didn't have a lot, and they were pushing strollers in, and we would tell them individually, you can take as much as you need. And they would do that. And then they would often go home, find a neighbor or a friend, call them up, and then have them come in. We offered to share the gospel with them if we could, but oftentimes we weren't able to do it because they were looking around at things. And we had people that were from our church that were helping them and would talk to them and befriend them. And then we would do the follow-up with those cards later on. And I'll talk about those in a second. But that's a garage giveaway. Everything that we couldn't give away on that day, we would pack it up and take it to a local charity where they would take it and they would sell it and earn some money. We didn't want to keep it in our church. It's just too much. Musical concerts. Your church might have very talented musical people, but they might not. That's okay. There's usually some local Christian bands, or maybe there's ones that are coming through town. They're looking for support for a few $100s. You can support them, but you can go out in your neighborhood and invite them. For us, what was most beneficial was not to do stuff inside the church. Again, it was a Hispanic culture, Hispanic neighborhood, and sometimes the Roman Catholic priests would say things that were not true about Protestants, and you don't want to go into their church. They do these things. And so we would see very suspicious children and very suspicious parents about their children going into our church. So we started doing things like Vacation Bible School or the carnival that we did at the end of VBS out on the lawn. We noticed that when we did it on the lawn, it was open. There was nothing to be afraid of. You could see everything that was happening. And then soon the children learned. They'd poke their head in. They'd ask to go to the bathroom. They'd ask to get some water from the drinking fountain inside. We'd let them do it. They'd look around a little bit and see there was nothing to be afraid of. But when you do these things like musical concerts, you might think about doing it out on your church lawn. Why do it inside if you can do it outside? As long as the city's okay with amplified music. You got to check into these things. There's other holidays as well. There's New Year's, there's Valentine's Day, there's the 4th of July, there's Halloween, and there's Christmas. You could put some other holidays in there as well. I don't know what you do for St. Patrick's Day, but you could probably find something to do. New Year's, they're lonely people. They have nowhere to hang out. You might be able to do some kind of little banquet, some little get-together where you give a message about the hope of the return of Christ. We used to call those watch night services at our church. You can have a watch night service, a nice dinner, something safe, alcohol-free, that glorifies God. And you find people that have nothing else to do, and they'd be happy to come with a friend or family member that would invite them. Valentine's Day, you got single people. They don't always have something to go. You could even start small. You can call it a friendship banquet if you want to get away from the romantic idea. But maybe even like we did it, do it at your house. Have the pastor or the elders, or maybe you've got a nice patio or a large enough living room where you could set some tables up and invite some people. Maybe some people from work would come and hear a little message and have a good time. 4th of July, there's a church here in Michigan that's an IFCA church where they have a big lawn right along the highway where the local parade goes by. They open their lawn up for anybody in the community to come out there and sit. And they give out water, and they give out ice cream, and they give out invitations to come to their church. What a great idea. There's lots of ways you could use the 4th of July. You could invite people to come and do things with you. You could have some kind of a picnic. You could do something that would be special that people might want to come to. Halloween is a controversial one, and not everybody's comfortable with doing anything on a day that clearly has its roots based in very evil things. But I think we should redeem the day. I mean, you could disagree with me. That's fine. It's a matter of conscience. But for our church, we used to find that there was all kinds of people out in front of our church, on the streets, all around as soon as it got dark. It was a dark community in the sense of spiritually dark. And so they celebrated Halloween in a big way. And we thought we're missing such an opportunity. So we set up one of those pop-up tent things where, you have a nice little roof and it gives you borders, and we put tables on the ends. We made popcorn, and then we had a guy making balloons, and we gave away popcorn and balloons and candy and tracts, and then we expanded it. We did something that a lot of churches do a variation on, but I'm going to get to what we did. It was a little bit more special. A lot of churches have a trunk or treat where they have a bunch of cars and you give out candy from the backs of the trunks, which is great. I mean, our church here in Michigan does it, where you have all these cars doing that, and get the community come out, and you can give out tracts and things like that. We were a little more strategic. I remember we gathered a team of people together, and by the way, this is a great idea, and we started brainstorming how we could reach our community at Halloween. And here's what we came up with. The trunk or treat, we called it Truth or Treat. I know that doesn't matter what you call it, but the Truth or Treat was an event where in our little parking lot, which I've mentioned before, we could only fit maybe 15 cars in it. We would get as many cars as we could possibly fit in there, and we would ask people to volunteer for a color. Now, many of you have probably heard of the Wordless Book. It's a book of colors that tells the gospel message. Like black stands for sin, and red stands for blood, and white stands for the purifying or justification that happens when we receive the forgiveness of God. There's lots of different colors. And so what we would do is we would ask the people that volunteered their cars as the trunk to pick a color. And then they would decorate their trunk all that color. it could be red and there would be hearts or whatever. It could be black and they could decorate it with whatever they wanted to do with black. And they could do all the colors. And we put them in the color order. Now, we'd have more volunteers than there are colors. So in between the colors, we would have them do something that was harvest themed. We wanted to get away from the evil stuff. So it was harvest themed. So pumpkins and scarecrows and, yellow and orange and green and corn and all that kind of stuff. So we'd have all these cars lined up in the order interspersed with harvest themed cars where they would give away candy. It was in that same parking lot that we did the garage giveaway. And then they would do the same thing. They would come up, they would register at the front before they could go in, and we would give them a tract, and we'd give them an invitation to the children's program, and then we would ask them to fill out a card so that we could follow up with them. And then we would give them a booklet that told them what the colors of the wordless bracelet meant. And then we would put on each of the people that went in, children as well as adults, a wordless bracelet. Of course, we'd have to make those beforehand. And it's just it's just really simple beads on a piece of leather. You can buy big, spools of that stuff. And we would just, have people volunteer to do that. And we'd make these wordless bracelets that were all the colors in the order. And they would wear them, and we would tell them at the gate, as you go through in the order of the cars, and every one of those colors, each of them are going to tell you what the color means. And they would go in and they would hit the first one, and the first one would tell them that piece of the gospel message. Children and parents alike, they'd all stand there and they would listen to that piece. Then they would give them some candy, then they go to the next one. Then get some candy, then go to the next one. You get the idea. All the way through, and they would hear the whole gospel message. We had the pop-up. We moved it from the front of the church into the parking lot area. We would give out coffee for parents and hot chocolate and popcorn. We'd have a sitting area for any parents that didn't want to walk all the way through. Parents get tired walking all the streets trick-or-treating, and they could sit and just watch their kids from a very safe distance. And then we had the prayer thing again. And I watched as people went, total strangers, talking to these couples that were there to pray with them and unburden their hearts, weeping about things that were going on in their lives, asking for prayer. We had people come to know Christ that way. What a wonderful blessing. And then they would leave and they would move on down the street. But boy, all of that easy picking for candy for the kids and it being a safe place, and it connected them with our church, was a wonderful, wonderful opportunity. It was always such a huge blessing for us to do it. And Thanksgiving, of course, you've got another opportunity where people are learning. Now, again, some churches don't meet on Thanksgiving. They do a potluck on the Sunday before oftentimes, and nothing happens. Our church always met on Thanksgiving. We wanted to be the church that was there on the day that we're giving praise to our God. And so we met. And oftentimes we'd have people who would bring their family, people that didn't have a church that was open on Thanksgiving, and so they'd come to our services. You could think of a lot of ways. Those are just some program ideas. Now, before we get into follow-up, I want you to know this, that you should prepare and make available invitation cards for your members to give away. Okay? They should be like business card size. They're small. You could stick them in your wallet, stick them in your purse, put them in your glove compartment, have them in your pocket. They're available. Make sure on them you have your church name, your church address, your website address, and your service times. Those are the bare minimums. Have those on there. There are some companies that they make these cards where they're business card size, but they fold open. There's maybe a picture on the front of a church or people drinking coffee or whatever it is, and you open it up and it's blank, and they fold after you've printed them. You can get some kind of a template. You can put it in your computer for a label maker program, and then you stick them in your printer or you photocopy them, and they'll print all of them, and then they have these little tiny micro perforations. You tear them apart, you fold them up, and you have them available. When we first introduced those to our church, I put them all on every pew. I put a couple of them. And I introduced them, told them what they were, told everybody, put them in your pockets, put them in your wallets, tell people about the church, give them this, and when you invite them, it's an easy way for them to tell people about their church. It doesn't have the gospel. I understand that. We're not talking about evangelizing. We're talking about inviting people to be our guests, to come and visit our church where we can share the gospel and get to know them better. Okay? The other thing is, I talked about the events that we do, about having visitor cards. You can call them visitor cards, you can call them guest cards, connection cards, whatever they might be. You can buy them, they still sell them. You can look for them on Amazon, church visitor cards, and you can just pick them up and they've got just all the basic information. Or you could just come up with something and make them. I actually happen to have two examples here from a recent event we did at our local church here. This is the invitation card. It's got the name of the church, and it was for a wild game dinner on Saturday, February 1st. It's got a cool picture of an elk. It's got the name of the church. On the back, it has the church's address, the time that it was our men's ministry. It says you're invited, good fellowship, good food, good news, and a call with text with questions, and had the name of the young man that was in charge of this, actually the one that came up with these things. Very simple, very nice looking, and very easy to hand out to invite people. So this is an example of one invitation card. And then we made these connection cards. I'll show you one that's blank here. I've got several of them. By the way, look at all these. These are all filled out, including drawings from a little boy. We've got some more here with follow-ups. And this one's very simple. It's got name, address, city, state, zip, phone number, email. Who invited you? That's important. You want to be able to have that connection. If, Joe Smith invited you and Joe goes to your church, you want to be able to follow up and say, hey, Joe's a great guy. He shared, what's your connection? Oh, he's my cousin. Oh, he's a coworker of mine. Oh, Joe comes to my supermarket. He's been inviting me for a long time, and I finally found an opportunity to come. And then on there, you want to maybe have a couple choices. Today and on ours, we said, today I decided to follow Jesus for the first time. Today I renewed my commitment to follow Jesus. Today I want to learn more about, and for this one, it was men's Bible study, or maybe your church name. Today I want to talk with somebody about faith in Jesus Christ. And then today I need prayer for, and then we had little lines here for them to write prayer requests. The reason these are separated from these is because these just put information there. These put prayer requests. And of course, we want to be praying for them faithfully. And so we set them apart so that we can do that. So make sure you have these, and you can have them in the pews. Those pews often are built with a little thing for cards. These are probably a little long for those things, but you can get the shorter ones. You can make them shorter, the index card size. Or you can hand them out. I know churches that will, at the time of the offering, will have an usher or a hostess come down and ask, is there any first-time visitors here with us this morning? And then they'll hand that to them. You can have them come into a welcome center or a table where you've got greeters there, and as they express their desire to know more about the church, you can hand them one of those there. You want to make sure that not too many people get away without getting one of these and filling it out. I'm going to get to that in a second, but make sure you have something like this. This is the key to following up with the people that you come. If you work hard to get them to come to an outreach event or a holiday service or something like that, you want to make sure that it's not just a one-shot deal and you have no idea. As a matter of fact, we talked about it in one of the videos about counting how many visitors you have. A lot of churches have no idea how many people have visited them, and they have no idea how many stayed. But this is a great way of being able to count that. We know exactly how many people filled out a visitor card, at least, to this wild game dinner. And so make sure you collect them in a good way. So remember, our churches should be attractive, but not attractional in the philosophy. Work at engaging people in life. And when you're given an opportunity, you have to proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ. That's the primary objective. It may not happen in the moment. At this particular wild game dinner, we made sure the gospel was presented. You might not be able to do it everywhere at every time, but your goal is to do it when you can. Maybe you're visiting them at their home. Maybe you're at the event and there's an opportunity. but that's the goal. Don't lose sight of the goal. All right? So, what do you do when you get them? You've planned this thing, or maybe it's just your average Sunday and they've shown up. They came in. Somebody from church invited them and they came. Maybe it's a wedding, a funeral, it's Christmas, it's Easter, it's something else. I don't know. Well, how do you recognize them? Well, it's widely debated whether you should publicly recognize new people in the service. Do we have any first-time visitors here? Would you please stand up? Some people are uncomfortable standing. Some people are comfortable asking them to stand or raise their hand or whatever you might want to do. It's debatable. I don't think people are as sensitive as we always think they are, but I can understand it being frequently a visitor in churches, why it might be uncomfortable for some people. But if you don't publicly recognize them in that way, make sure you recognize them informally and personally. There's nothing worse than going to a place where you're the guest and nobody ever says anything to you. You come, you stay, you leave, and nobody says a word to you. That's a horrible experience. That's worse than asking somebody to stand up and let them know that you're a visitor for the first time. So if you don't do it that way, make sure you do it in some other way. Secondly, use these registration or visitor cards or contact cards, whatever you want to call them. Get their contact information and make sure you have a plan for a personal visit and a letter. All right, let me tell you what I mean by that. So, this is what we do at our church. When a contact card has been received, and how do you do that? Well, you've got to collect them. I'm going to get to that in a minute. But once you receive them, then I would take that letter and that person's name and address, and I would write them a letter. I'd have a standard letter. Sometimes I'd personalize a little bit if I knew something about them, like it says that Joe Smith had invited them. I might put in there, thanks for coming. We're so glad that Joe invited you. He's a great guy. He's been serving as a deacon for several years at our church. He is very active and he's a wonderful man. I'm glad you know him. Something like that. It makes a connection. So you send a personal letter. The letter goes out ahead of you. And then the second thing is you make a personal visit. Now, I don't have them anymore. I left them at the church when I left. But I used to have this big box of all these index card-sized visiting cards. And I would mark on them on the back that I'd sent the letter and the date I'd sent the letter and then the day that I went to visit and what happened when I visited them. I kept a record of that because people matter. People matter. We're not counting just nickels and noses. We're counting people. And so I'd write on there my experience, what had happened. Mean dog chased me out of the yard or whatever it was. But I'd go and maybe I knocked on the door and they weren't home. Okay? So go and make a personal visit. People don't do that anymore. Churches used to do that all the time. That was just kind of a common thing. And I experienced it over and over and over again when I'd knock on people's doors and they're stunned and I'd say, you look familiar. And I'd say, yes, I'm the guy that was preaching at church. You went to our church on Sunday. Oh, yes, thank you. Thank you. And they'd say, you know what? I never expected you to come visit me. And I'd always tell them this. I make it a habit that you were kind enough to come and visit us, that I want to come and visit you. Now, when I get into the house, often I would be invited into the house, and usually I would have somebody with me. I definitely wouldn't go in the house if it was a woman by herself, but I'd go into the house and sit down. Sometimes hair's kind of bedhead, pajamas on still, house is a little messy, in the middle of eating breakfast, all kinds of scenarios. But I would go in, you ignore all of that, and we just ask them a few follow-up questions, like, just wanted to see if you had any questions about the service or the message. Just interested how you heard about our church and why you came. Any prayer requests that you might have. I might even get, depending on how the conversation was going, to the point of asking them, do you know Jesus Christ? They might tell me their church history of where they were going to church before they came. But you see, they've come to our church. They've already opened up this conversation by just visiting our church. And so we follow up. There was a high success rate of people really appreciating it and having a positive view of our church. And many, many of them would come back because they've been personally visited themselves. themselves. They were looking for something. And so make sure you do that you visit those visitors, all right? Now, we visited specifically on Saturdays, and we visited specifically on Saturdays between 10 and 12 o'clock, 2-hour window. We could have probably visited in the evenings, but in Los Angeles, when people are off of work, they're often really tired and not in the best mood and don't want to hear what they would consider a religious pitch. And although we weren't doing it that way, it could come off that way. And so we would do it on Saturdays. Of course, they might have had a late night out or whatever, but that's why we did it from 10 to 2. Before 10, people are still sleeping. They're not really excited to have you come over to their house before then. 10 o'clock, they're usually up, even if they're still in their pajamas and eating breakfast. After 12, they're usually getting ready to go somewhere or they've already left. We found that most people weren't around anymore, or at least they weren't answering the door. 10 to 12 was the window. Now, I know in some cultures and some places, people want you to call before they come over. That's probably true where we were at. But here's what I found out very quickly, that I had a visitor card and I'd call them and set up an appointment. Hey, can I come by and visit you at 10 o'clock this coming Saturday? Oftentimes they'd agree, and oftentimes they wouldn't be there when I got there. I found out, you know what? They'll be there if they don't know I'm coming. And so I would not call. I would just show up. Most of the time it went well. Nobody was upset with me. Maybe a little embarrassed because of their disheveled look or their messy house. But I didn't really care, and I didn't draw attention to it at all. 10 to 12. That was the golden window for us. Did it every single Saturday. All right? So follow up on those people. Now, remember, you need these cards. So I said I'm going to talk about collecting them. There's lots of ways to collect them. We would tell people when offering was being collected, when the plates are being passed, we're going to collect the offering, and you need to know this. These are for people that are attending this church. This is an act of worship for us as believers. If you're our guest here, we'd ask you don't need to give anything. Feel free just to take the visitor card that you were handed. Make sure you fill it out. Put it inside the plate when it comes by. And that's the way we'd collect it. I'd tell the deacons when they went to count the money from the offering, make sure those end up on my desk. I wanted to make sure, these are critically important, that I got them. All right? Maybe you don't pass the plate. Maybe you have a box or something where people drop their offerings in. You can ask people if they would do that. Problem is, oftentimes, if nobody's watching, they might not do it. You might not get the card back. Okay? Not everybody turned them in the offering plate either. But it was a little easier. It was coming by. They felt like they would do it then more. All right. You might have some kind of a welcome table. And here's what you can do. You can tell them, if you have one of those visitor cards, we'd ask for you to fill it out. And when you leave, we have a welcome table in the foyer when you came in. If you'll go up there, give them the visitor card, and we have a gift for you. Now, of course, you have to have a gift for them. You can't say that and not have a gift. But it could be a small booklet, maybe something that you have written and you've put together and you've had printed. Maybe something that you really appreciated and you bought. Maybe a gospel booklet, tract of some kind. There's lots of them out there. A lot of publishers produce them to be handed out like at Christmas and at Easter. Maybe the next time those are out there, you buy extras for using for visitor gifts. You could also give them maybe like a small water bottle or a coffee mug with your church's name and logo on it. Or maybe something as simple as, you can buy them very inexpensively from a company like Uline. These little bags, they're like little shopping bags where you would just get a couple things in it, not very much. They're very small. You could even make some stickers that have your church's name and logo on it and put them on there if you want to get extra fancy. Put a pamphlet in there that tells about your church, that has service times and things in it. Maybe a magnet, maybe whatever, but you put a candy bar in there. You might put a CD of sermons, although not a lot of people are listening to CDs. But you could put something else in there, and that's the gift. They get a little candy bar, they get, a pamphlet, a tract, and something else like that. And you can give that as your gift. Okay? Follow up with those visitor cards within a week, if possible. Tell them, you visited us, we're visiting you. Okay? So, create an environment that is for your guests. Make sure you're thinking about them when they get there. Make sure there are people to welcome them in with a warm handshake. Don't get the guys that are always chatting and they can't break a chat for somebody. Visitors feel like they're interrupting a personal conversation. No. They need to be serious. They somehow mark them. They make these little pins. A lot of churches use lanyards. It's got the church's name on it. It says welcomer or welcome. Or volunteer, whatever. They need to know that you're there that the visitors, the welcomers, are there to help them. So make sure you have something that says that, and make sure they're good at it. To have the bulletin, if you give those out, and a warm handshake, and say, "Hi, welcome to so-and-so church. Is this your first time here? Oh, wonderful. We're glad you came to visit us. And can I show you where to go? Maybe they need to use the restroom. Maybe they need to know where to sit. Anything like that. Make sure you've got really warm, very inviting people. Don't put people there that you don't know where else to put them, okay? Put the best of the best there because you want to welcome them. Train your leaders, your deacons, your elders, any other kinds of leaders, people that you really, really trust because they're good, solid people. Train them to approach them when they see them. Your elders should know the people in your church. If they see people that they don't recognize, you should train them to go up and engage them, introduce themselves, find out where they're from, find out how they came to know about your church, just to answer any questions they might have. Train your leaders to welcome them. I was told by one pastor one time that they should work the room. You go around, that they don't go and sit in their seats and just, stay to themselves. They should walk around welcoming people, not just first-time guests, but all people, because they're leaders in the church, making sure that they get to know everybody. But when they see people that they don't recognize, that they should make a beeline over there and welcome them themselves. And then train your church at large to welcome visitors, that they're just warm, friendly people. I'll tell you what, if it's a cold church and it's a warm church, a place where you feel like they're family, it feels like home, which place are you going to come back to? Okay? It's always going to be the warm and welcoming church. So make sure you tell your people. Maybe you preach a series of sermons. Maybe you just take a special time, family time. Maybe it's an evening service. Maybe it's a Wednesday night. And you start telling them we need to work on welcoming our visitors. Encourage some of them that have the means and the ability to invite them to their homes or invite them to a restaurant after church on Sunday mornings to go to lunch. You need to help people to understand that this is critically important, that the warmth of Christ needs to come through as we visit people, as people visit us in our churches. It'll make the world of difference. Every negative experience that I can think of in my multiple visits to churches is always accompanied with a group of people who don't really care that I'm even there. It doesn't matter if the pastor warmly welcomes me and everybody else is a cold, dead fish. The best experiences are when the whole church is warm and welcoming. Even if I don't talk to everybody, the people that I do talk to are because they approached me. I'm the new guy. And they came to me and said hi and welcomed me and told me where things are at or offered to tell me. That's a great experience. You want to make sure that you do that. Now, of course, all of those things will not guarantee that your visitor is going to return. God is drawing them. God is the one that will lead them. Your church might not be a good fit. It might be that they're an out-of-town guest and they're thankful for the warm welcome. They're thankful for hearing the word. Maybe they're believers and they already go to a great church. And they'd come to yours if they lived in the area, but they don't. But I'll tell you this. Doing these things, not only figuring out how can we invite visitors, but once they're there, how can we assure that we're doing everything we can to welcome them, will increase the odds that they will come back, that you'll get to know them a little bit better. See, if they get offended by the gospel, that's not our problem. If they don't want to talk about their sin, that's not our problem. If they're an open, blatant rebellion to Christ and they don't want to be around God's people, that's not our problem. But if they come in and they're curious and they feel the cold deadness of our church. That's our problem. We want to make sure we take all of those reasons and excuses away and be as warm and inviting as we can. The gospel will offend, but it shouldn't be us. Let's make sure that that's not what our church is known for, is being cold, uninviting, and offensive. Well, I hope this whole series has been helpful to you. I know I've learned a lot through my own failures and my own experiences in trying to do everything. It's not the end of it all. I mean, there's lots and lots of good ideas out there, and you should go looking for them. But we want to be a little bit helpful with these 4 podcasts in this series. And if you have any follow-up questions or you'd like to know more, you can email us at advancing@ifca.org. advancing@ifca.org. Of course, if you're watching this on YouTube, you can always put a comment. And if you're listening, you can reach out to us by that email address. Thanks again for tuning in and listening and watching us. If you want to know more about IFCA International, go to our website. You'll find everything out about us at www.ifca.org. Well, until next time, I'm Richard Bargas, the Executive Director of IFCA International. God bless. We'll see you next time. Bye.